Hello, everybody on LinkedIn. I'm Jim Costin. We're glad you're spending some time with us here today. I'm here with Les DeBusk Lane, and we'll get to Les here in just a second, but we'd love to have you drop your top five there in chat if you let us know your top five or where you're listening from. We have a question for you as well, which is what strength are you leaning into right now and how you can give us a little bit of that info. What strength are you leading with or leaning into right now? And how, Les, great to have you on this program. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Give us a little bit, if I ask the crowd that question, you think we're going to get to know you, excuse me, we're going to get to know you here in just a second. But as you think about what you're doing right now, what strength are you leaning into most out of your top five?
Mm. I'd probably say I consistently lean into learner. I think it's what I lean into. I actually lean more into my something out of my top 10, which is
Hmm.
ideation. It's literally number 10. I do quite a bit of ideation in my daily work.
It for you, what does ideation look like for you when you say you're leading or leaning in with it?
Mm.
What does that kind of look like? If you were to describe that process to somebody, how would you say that works?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of being intentional about how you focus your effort. So in my role, ideation is a lot of brainstorming, creativity, development, uh, reaching into that space. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. So it's really that kind of forward leaning into a space that's not yet there, but it just needs some thought.
I've often said on Theme Thursday when I have Ideation 7, and for me, it's actually a relaxing theme. I like to solve problems right before I go to sleep. And
Mm.
so I go into ideation mode as I put my head on the pillow and get comfortable, then start trying to solve problems. And it's actually I know for most people they say that's crazy, but it relaxes me. And I find great comfort in just churning through problems. Probably is I see from your facial expressions, probably not the way it works for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's entirely wrong or true. Maybe not right for
Yeah.
me. I think being my first one is learner, so
Hmm.
um, ideation supports learning, obviously, and it drives learning. It drives avenues for learning. So I think that's probably how those two things interact, and it's not always comfortable. It's kind of it's like I need to go learn that because that's super interesting, and it came about because I was thinking of how to do something creatively.
No, that's super great. I just love that it can be similar for both of us in a position, but manifests itself very different. I have arranger, woo, maximizer up front, and so it kind of has a whole different way of the way I use that, the way I lean into it, the way I'm successful with it. So, if you're just joining us on LinkedIn, thanks for coming. And like you see on the screen, do us a favor, drop your top five in chat, maybe where you're listening from today. Then we're kind of asking that question: what strength are you leaning into right now, and how? Don't be afraid to put that in the chat room, and Riley behind the scenes will throw that up on the screen. I'm here with Les DeBusk Lane, and Les, welcome to this program.
Thank you.
Let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us your top five, and then maybe what you do for Gallup.
Sure. So, learner, analytical, achiever, arranger, and individualization. I'm a computational social scientist. That's a fancy term for I do quite a bit of statistics and world modeling and statistical modeling for Gallup.
We today we're talking about making a mid-career change, and I think it'll be applicable to any kind of career change. You think of mid, maybe it being in the 15 to 20 year mark or 10 or whatever. I think what we're going to talk about today is pretty applicable across all career changes, even making out of coming out of college and going into a career. But less for you, give us an idea when you transit because you recently transitioned to Gallup. Tell us a little bit about that transition and how that came to be.
Yeah, sure. So, I spent 12 years in the United States Marine Corps flying KC 130J models. Um, Beautiful opportunity. Opened many doors and avenues to understanding the world, and I got to go to about 64 different countries. Spent about 6,500 hours in the air. It's just a beautiful opportunity, very disjointed from what you probably envision a military experience being, but um, that really drove, a look into how people learn, and especially under stress. So aviation inherently, especially as a daily flyer, there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of training, and there's a lot of stress all kind of intermixed together. And that kind of drove a passion to figure out what about that is mechanistic, what about that is, uh, part of human psychology, and how can we optimize it. So, you pair that with some family stuff. I have two young daughters that were growing up, and I didn't necessarily want to be gone all the time. I did 8 deployments, and even being back home non-deployed, it was about a 300-day a year gone type job. So, um, you pair those two things together. I ended up going to grad school, and studying psychology. Have a PhD in educational psychology, and study, how people learn, especially how people hold efficacious beliefs of their capacity to learn. Um, and yeah, that really kind of morphed itself into the role that I work in today. Um, yeah.
When you were in the Marines, did you have any idea of Clifton Strengths? Had that been exposed to you yet? Did you have any availability to it?
No, no, not really. I mean, so the job field that I worked in is just super, I guess, super selective, just in the sense that you have to meet all the wickets in the world, both physically, mentally, psychologically. Um, so you're working with quite a few people that are quite similar in those regards to you. So, all together, we were all big learners. I mean, understanding aviation and flying and all the other FAA type, stuff does take a certain intellect, if you will. And I think that really opened up. It was a great place to explore that strength. I didn't know it was a strength back then. I just knew it was something that I was okay at. And so it's finding opportunities to develop things that you're innately good at, per se, as a strength.
What kind of advice would you give then? There may be some individuals listening today that haven't taken Clifton Strengths yet. We'd encourage them to go out and take it. But as you think in retrospect and you think about that time you had in the military, were there some, what kind of advice would you give to those folks who don't know it, maybe about success in that role or in a
Yeah,
role?
that's good. I think the best advice I would get is, obviously, we can understand as psychologists can understand that everybody is unique in certain ways, and I think you understand you yourself are unique in certain ways, but you can't necessarily put your finger on it. Oftentimes, you react certain ways in certain situations, or you're really good at math and you love figuring out problems, or you're really awesome at reading and summarizing things, or you have tendencies to just be really bubbly around 1,000 people, which is not me. But you can't put your finger on it. So I think quantitizing some of those things and actually having something that can tell you more about yourself than you can fully actualize is it's beautiful in a way, because understanding what your top strengths are and how you can leverage them to kind of optimize your own performance is awesome. I think it meshes a lot with many other ways that you see out there to optimize performance, like getting more sleep or exercising or all those other things. It falls right in line with tools that you can leverage.
Do you think, and this may be an obvious question, but do you think if you had known your strengths in the military, that would have changed things for you, made things better? Would you have been able to take advantage of things more, having that framework during that time? And I always hate to ask these kinds of questions because hindsight's always 2020, right?
Yeah.
But thinking about that from a career, a military career standpoint, how helpful might that have been to you?
Uh, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty hard one. Like when you think back of like flailing around the development space of your career, without any like honed direction of like who you are and what you want to do and how good you could be at doing something, given what you know about yourself. I mean, that's how we make decisions, and heuristics and all that other stuff is, we have a certain idea of like how well we can do on something. If we don't have any powerful thoughts there, then we deviate somewhere else that is more optimal for ourselves. So I think it would have been, great to know. I think I kind of knew in a way, but again, just like I kind of said of like why it would be useful, or what kind of recommendation I would give is like it would have been great to be able to put my finger on and be like, yes, I see, I love learning. I'm awesome. I would say I'm awesome at it, but like I really enjoy doing it to the point that I do it a lot. Maybe I should kind of lean on that. I'm not sure it would have changed my trajectory much. I think it's quite durable. If that helps answer.
Yeah, I think so. And you don't know the situations and strengths in a person in an isolated form, or they don't have a support structure around them, or a teams that are thinking about it, or a coach that might be helping with it. It can be difficult. But as we think about, and by the way, if you're listening on LinkedIn, we'd love to have your questions. So if you want to throw those in the chat room, if you got questions for Les or comments, drop those in the chat room. We'll be highlighting those on the screen. So, Les, thinking about what you know now, and then thinking about this career transition, because I think it intimidates me. Like that's one of my worst nightmares, is having to change jobs. I don't want to move. I don't want to change jobs. Those are the two things I don't want to do. You just made that transition. If you were going to thinking about then from a strengths-based perspective, things you learned through that transition, what kind of advice would you give individuals who may know their strengths or may know some of those things? How is that helpful to you in this transition?
Yeah, I think every change is risk. There's a risk matrix or risk calculus that you kind of do, especially in terms of career changes. Having a young family was probably at the tip of that risk matrix. And so kind of understanding what I was good at, or what things I could leverage that could probably optimize my performance, would have been a hand up in that situation a little bit of like, okay, cool, I'm in the right place. It's validating to know I'm in grad school, or it's validating to know I'm heading in this trajectory that has potential to provide for my family in a different way than I have been. So that transition between being a full-time military service member to being a full-time corporate, whatever, or some other, pivot in life. I think it's instrumental. It would have been instrumental, knowing what I know now, to be able to have a little bit more, I guess, validative strength in that situation of like, yep, I'm right here. I'm doing good. I just got to keep pressing. I know these are what I'm strong at. I know what these are who I am. And I think that's where a lot of people have struggles, is like, I don't know if this is right for me. And I think this is maybe a connecting bridge. It's information to add to that pile, that toolbox, that helps make it can help make good, solid decisions of who you are, aligning with what you're doing.
So as I think about you as an aviator in the Marines, and now you're a data scientist for Gallup, seemingly two very different jobs, right? From that standpoint, how do you think, and you mentioned learner a little bit earlier, but I want to dive a little bit deeper on that. How do you think those core values or those core themes and things you did well in the Marines translated to now what you're doing as a data scientist for Gallup, even though the roles are, I would say, are pretty different?
Yeah. So I think the biggest one of that is having the flexibility to expand upon what I already know. Because I think if you think about data science, it's pretty quick. It's pretty obvious to understand that what it was yesterday is not what it is today. There's not probably a week that goes by that the team that I work on, we don't shift methodologies because the state of the art has shifted. And so I think like that is quite similar to having to, fly in a different direction because the president wanted something different one day versus the next. And I think the core of that is flexibility, but at the same time, like, no unforeseen mission doesn't require learning to understand, the parameters that are around it and how to optimize performance therein. So that's kind of the crux of how they align. I think, understanding how people learn, but also being a high learner myself is there's definitely transference there, meaning, what I used to have to learn, there's no end to learning in aviation. At least I don't believe so. There's always something you can do better. It's an infinite space of learning. Same as data science. Data science. I'm not even going to try. We tend to kick around the idea of trying to define data science in our team quite often, and it's not easy, nor is it something that we do really well. It's so broad, it's so developing, it is everything under the umbrella. But answering questions that are substantively important with data is essentially what we do. So it's very similar.
You've mentioned learner a few times. Let's remind everybody of your top 5. Can you go through those again for
Yeah,
us?
sure. So learner, analytical, achiever, arranger, and individualization.
So as we think about being a pilot, being an aviator, and then that analytical bit seems to make sense in the new career.
Mhm.
Do you think you applied that as much as in the aviation space as you did or as you are now? Or are those things flexing a little bit kind of based on the role?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different data source, right?
Mhm.
I think the data source in aviation is the parameters that you're always facing. And again, it's a risk calculation quite often, but weather, situation, risk tolerance, the crew, all those things are variables in a mix that are kind of they have to be analytically assessed, and you have to learn from them. You have to, there's things that you have to achieve. You have optimal goals and missions, and how you arrange that as a leader. I think the Marine Corps is a leadership development. You know, I don't know the right word for it, but basically it breeds leaders from day one. So um, if you walk down learning a crew, being analytical about the situation and the risk calculus, achieving the mission, and then arranging, the people around you, but also understanding who you are as an individual, that is literally my top 5. So I think there's a lot of alignment there, whereas, data science is very clearly aligned um, along those things, because there's always a goal, there's always things to learn, there's always pieces to put together and to compute. But
We got a couple questions coming in from the chat room. Let's bring those in. So Teresa asked, really, she also really, or she wishes she had the level of learning that you do. How do you feel about exams? We always think of high learners, then you got to eventually take the test. I don't have learner high, but I'm a really good test taker. How do you feel about exams?
yeah, I might not have being a trained educational psychologist as well. I may not have the most popular opinion of exams. I think cross-sectional assessments of someone's knowledge does not necessarily always fully represent their full knowledge capacity in that area, nor does a test. I mean, obviously there's error in tests, right? We know that as Gallup, we know that you measure something, there's always error involved. Where the sources of error are is not always apparent. We can model it, but at the same time, like I think they can be stressful. I think they can be poorly done, especially in academics. There's probably only a handful of great tests out there. They're super hard to make really well done. So I don't have a positive opinion. I think there's better assessments. I think portfolios or practical example exams or practical evaluations are far more effective at judging if the objective is to judge someone's knowledge or capacity in a certain area. I think there's way better things than a multiple choice exam. That
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah. No, it's a good answer to that. Sarah asked this question. She says, with the topic of mid-career job change, when or how often do you suggest taking the CliftonStrengths assessment? Would you took it? I'm assuming at this point, I remember you took it for us when you came in. Was that, or had you taken it before you joined us?
It's funny you asked that. So my advisor in grad school had our entire team take the strengths assessment a long time ago. Boy, it was probably 7 years ago now, and I do remember my top 5 being exactly the same. And I, especially when I was hired here a couple of years ago, it was like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. It's quite durable. It's quite, the repeater inter-rater reliability here is quite high. So, yeah, I don't know if I think under, the sooner you can take it, I think the better. if you've never taken it before. Um, I don't know if that answers the question very well, but I don't know if you have a different view on that, Jim, or not.
We can, I mean, we have a view, Gallup
Mhm.
saying really take it one time,
Yeah.
and but we've also outlined some situations when it maybe should be taken again, like when you didn't take it seriously the first time, right? Lots of
Right.
students are in that situation where they just, they go through it. This career change concept that we're kind of talking about today, this may be really, really applicable. You may have been in an employer where you took it and you didn't care. You're just like, my employer's making me do this thing. I'm just going to check the box. I had asked you this question, Les, earlier about, did the military, how much support and did you take advantage of when you were leaving the military to make the career change? They do have some career change services.
Yeah.
CliftonStrengths could be, it's not in all cases, but in some cases, it's part of that career change matrix that organizations have to help
Hmm.
with that. Oftentimes, you're thinking about the next job, maybe not taking the assessment, right? So if you didn't take it seriously,
Yeah.
right, and we've had a lot of, I mean, coming out of military background, there may have been a traumatic experience in your life as part of that, right? And we've had lots of military members have that traumatic experience that they've gone through. Maybe a good time to retake it on the backside of that. Lots of things may have changed. Do you think you were in for 12 years, young less versus 12 years later less? Same person? Different? Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that. Where'd you grow and what areas did you grow in that?
Yeah. Definitely different person. I think experience drives, just development, of course. But like, I think one thing that is important in this conversation is the relevance of taking it. If you take it purposefully, it's relevant to you immediately.
Mhm.
If an employer makes you take it, or you're in a college course or something that has to take it for the final exam, to speak of exams again, like it's a 10-point bonus or something crazy like that, it probably doesn't mean much to you, and you probably don't even look at the results. So I think purposefully taking it, even if you haven't taken it in 10 years or 2 years, like if you're going to actually think about taking it and be meaningful about it, and try to actually understand what things are in your bottom 10, and how does that influence you, um, and one things that are in your top 10, and how are you leveraging things aren't in your top 5 but in your top 10. So like
Mhm.
if you actually take a purposeful approach to it, it's often like, people want to learn what they want to learn, they want to do what they want to do, but that I think is also instrumental in taking it again. I do think that people change. However, it's inherently obvious to me that some characteristics are quite durable to who you are. I think psychology speaks well to that, but uh, and I think this picks up on that. But I do think, you know, could I really focus on, I don't know, ideation, because it's my number 10 strength, and could it exhibit to be a bit higher or a bit lower? I think there's a little bit of variability there, but like things may shift around a little bit, but most things are going to be quite durable.
I like it. Teresa's asking this question: have you unlocked your 34? And of course, as Gallup employees, we have access to all 34 themes here. But earlier, you might have taken it. Maybe it was top 5 only. As you think about now having access to all 34 in the report, and you've just mentioned ideation's 10.
Yeah.
How helpful in maybe even transitioning into this new career at Gallup?
Yeah.
How helpful has that been to you to know all 34?
Oh, I think it's been great. So I'm going to paraphrase the quote, but like, understanding your lower strengths, it's not super optimal to focus on them to make them better, right? That's not going to make you overall perform better. What it will do, though, is it allow you get them to help you get them out of the way, so that your top strengths can blossom. And I think that's the beauty of understanding all of them. Um, I leverage ideation quite often, and it it would be it's always been surprising to me that I didn't used to have to ideate all that much, but I do enjoy it, and I do have to lean into it quite a bit. I think I have to lean into it purposefully because it's not in my top 5. Um, it's just not naturally exhibited. So I would have never known that had I not had all of them per se. But um, there's also some validative effort there too. Like woo is not like super high. Like I'm just not, it's not me. I'm pretty happy, in my office by myself, until forever. But, um, so I think those things are validative in a way, but also allow you just to recognize like, maybe I shouldn't be the person in our team that has to take a candidate around and talk to them all day or something. I don't know. It helps you leverage things and get things out of the way.
Yeah, and yet there are times, you're bringing your expertise to us today, and you're doing a great job of outlining that and talking through it. And so, I think it's knowing when to be there, and maybe you wouldn't want to do this every day. I mean, this is the second one of these I've done this week, and will be I think I'm 3 into 7 for the entire week, right, that we're doing. I love doing it. That probably you're shaking your head. So for you, you're like, "Oh, one is enough," right?
Yeah, I'm gonna go outside and walk for about 2 hours after this by myself. And my
That's great.
dog. Maybe.
It's great awareness. I have individualization relator and developer in a triplet in 6 through 10. That's
Mhm.
7, 8, 9. And I never really understood before I got those. I never really understood how those played into I'm seen as the front man, the front person
Mhm.
oftentimes, but I do really, really, really enjoy spending time with people,
Yeah.
developing them from an individual standpoint. That seems a little opposite, but from a career standpoint, that's helped me understanding that. I think has helped me out a lot. It's kind of why I'm in the role and what I do from a community
Yeah.
perspective. Yes, we have 13,000 certified coaches around the world. Yes, I treat them all one at a time. I also do a lot of mass mailings to them. So we go, we do both methods with them. Less practical tips as we're thinking of just in the final few minutes here. If someone's thinking about, and there's a lot of people that's already made a career transition. So
Mhm.
maybe let's talk to that first. What have you learned through this transition, or what kind of tips, quick tips would you give to somebody about starting in the new role?
Uh, ha- Keep in mind, this is coming from someone that's an analytically minded achiever. I think understanding the stepping stones to get to where you want to be can be accomplished. Understanding who you are along that path is awesome. Um, Career change is hard, stressful. It's a risk. However, it's most always because you want and know and believe that the grass is greener somewhere. So I think like, you know, it, I often reference the toolbox approach of like, you have a toolbox of information or skills. How can you leverage those tools or skills to get where you want to be? Um, and so I think like that's probably the quickest way I could probably say that. But I think having those strengths, having those tools to understand that the grass may be greener is instrumental in helping you get there.
Hmm.
And so I think taking that step, knowing those things, makes that step towards a change like that a little bit easier.
Hmm. Not that this pertains to making a mid-career change, but what's the coolest part about your new job? Is you think about this transition, you're in this role, and you think, man, I get to do this every day. What is that thing that you really look forward to?
Still supporting an overall mission. So at Gallup, I work on primarily within the public sector of our business model, but primarily with DoD employees and DoD entities. Um, and I think the mission there, spanning from a small career in the military, is it's still meaningful to be doing meaningful work. I also, consult on all kinds of other Gallup, clients that almost everything that they're trying to do, they're trying to figure something out. That's what Gallup is really good at, is figuring things out, asking good questions that mean something to someone because that's why we're asking them. And so I think like having that inherent meaning behind what we're doing is awesome. So I mean, a lot of companies out there, they do work um, that may not necessarily have a ton of like obvious meaning to it. It may be, bringing in a paycheck, but it doesn't mean, you don't go home and tell your loved ones like, I did this today because it means this to this person or this entity, or it answered this type of question. So I think that's really, those aligned things really mean a lot to me.
Oh, I like it. Les, thanks for, well, one, thank you for your service. I haven't said that yet, and I should. So thank you for your service. As well as thanks for spending time with us today. This is, I think, one of these unique situations that we find ourselves in. Everyone is making these changes. We know from our numbers, there are a ton more making changes in their careers today than there's ever been. And I see it in our certified coaches' email addresses as they change. Just that stat that I track on a fairly regular basis because I have to find our certified coaches once they've moved. So we have a lot of folks in transition. I think this is just a good topic to have. We've spent a couple times talking about starting your career, and so when we got this opportunity to think and spend some time thinking about a mid-career change, I jumped at it as well. So Les, thanks for coming on and being a part of the program today.
Yeah, thank you. It's great
As
talking.
as we're on our thank you, and we're on our way out, just a couple reminders. One, we'll edit this and put it on the Clifton Strengths podcast. So if you haven't subscribed to that, just go out to your favorite podcast player and subscribe. Just search Clifton Strengths. We'd love to have you join us on that. We produce content like this, plus a lot of other great stuff that you can get on a weekly basis. If you have any questions, you can always email us at coaching@gallup.com. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for coming out. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.